Today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to disassemble one of the patches I use. One you're listening to here. This is the space pad of some kind. Inspired by a lot of stuff by, let's see, Jean-Michel Jarre and things like that. And so what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to take apart this patch and give you a little tour of how I build my sounds. Some of this is built in the hardware. Some of it's there's a little processing in Ableton as well. But really, all of my sound creations, all of my patches and stuff, follow the same sort of basic premise. I work in layers. And so what I'm going to do is disassemble this sound down to its component layers, which are all relatively simple, and show you how it's done. And maybe that's something useful for you. You can take it and carry it forward in your own music making and see where it goes. So this is my Jarre style space patch. Okay, so let's disassemble this sound. The basis of this sound is coming from a Nord lead A1. Okay, you may not have one of those synths, but that's okay, right? You can build this in whatever synths you do have, be them software or hardware. That's the whole point of why I'm taking this apart. Now, the Nord lead synth has 4 sort of layered synth engines in it. There are 4 slots or 4 layers, right? So for whatever you're doing, if your synth has layers, something like Innovation Peak, I think, has a couple layers. If you're using a soft synth like Omnisphere, you can have 4 layers in each patch and and layers on layers in there. Basically, if you've got a synth that has multiple oscillators, that's fine. You can use that as well. But having layers, distinct layers, where each layer has its own set of filters and modulation sources and effects, makes it a lot easier to make this kind of sound. So the first layer of this patch, right, is something close to a sawtooth wave. It's actually a sawtooth that's been folded a little bit, so depending on your synthesizer, whatever your options are, you can use a sawtooth certainly, or you can use a square. Squares are a little more hollow sounding, sawtooths are a little more brassy, but this is a sawtooth that's been folded on itself a little bit. If you have a wavetable synthesizer, you can explore some of the digital waveforms that are there, but it's pretty plain, right? We see the fundamental there, a little over 500 hertz, and there's some harmonics above it. And then over time, I've got a 12 dB low pass filter slowly closing. Okay. You can see those high frequencies drop out over time. And then what I do to this is we add a little unison. So what that does is that makes copies of that wave, detunes them slightly, and layers them on top of each other. Right, so we've got that sort of warbling detunedness, and then the filter closing over time. To that, I also add a little bit of chorus. Makes it a little more shimmery. I also add a very little bit of delay. You can hear that echo in there. And then a bit of hall reverb. So that in itself is a nice pad. You could just get away with using that, if that's what you like, right? That is nothing fancy. That's one oscillator, okay, with some unison, some chorus, some delay, and a little reverb. Let's talk about the next layer. Okay, now this layer is a plain sawtooth. It is being filtered. It's being filtered with a bandpass filter that is slowly opening and then closing. So you can see the frequencies, high frequencies come in and then come out. Rising up and then dropping out. Not completely, we still have the fundamental. Now this oscillator is, I believe, an octave below the other one. Let's see. That's our first oscillator, our first layer. This is our next. Yeah, so we're an octave below. So these two layers are an octave apart. That gives it some body, right? This second oscillator is an octave down and really doesn't have anything crazy going on. It's got a little bit of unison, but no effects, no chorus, no delay, no reverb even. And its point is to sort of add some body to the previous oscillator. So let's hear them together. Pretty simple. So those two oscillators are getting layered. We've got 2 layers of our 4 layers here. Then we're going to add in a little sparkle. So we're going to add an arpeggiated layer. Okay, so what this is a sawtooth wave. It has a little bit of chorus, a little bit of delay, and a little bit of a hall reverb on it. Right, it is arpeggiating down on quarter notes with, I believe, an dotted eighth delay. Okay, so that gives us some nice motion on top of those pads, and the pads themselves are rising and falling as their filters open and close, and so these combined adds a lot of that spacey feel. Now I've actually got on my 4th layer another arpeggiated pad. Now this is running as half notes, quarter notes. It's running at half the speed of the previous layer, but also arpeggiated. This is sort of a bell waveform. On the Nord there are some bell and some digital waveforms that sound a little more bell-like. It's running through a 24 dB filter. The filter's got a pretty fast decay, no attack, so it sounds like a pluck. You can check the other videos on sort of Berlin School pluck, how to make those sounds. Right, but this is, again, another layer arpeggiating at half the rate of the previous one. So I've basically, in this patch, got 2 arpeggiated layers running in sync, but one is half the speed of the other. And when we put it all together, right? Those are single notes. Let's play a chord. So that's all on the synth. So we've got, you could do this with multiple synths. You know, if you've got a bunch of mono synths, you could chain them together. Or if you've got a synth that'll do layers, like I'm using here, you could do that. If you have multiple hardware synths, you could stack them up. If you're using software, certainly in live, if the software supports layers, use it. If it doesn't, you can use multiple instances of a VST and use them as layers and set each one differently. Set an arpeggiator for 2 of them as interesting opposing arpeggiation layers, and then set 2 more for pads, and build your own sort of thick sort of space pad. Now I want to do a little bit more on top of this, but I've sort of reached the limit of my synth here, more or less, but I want to get a little bit more. So there are some effects within the DAW, within Ableton itself, that I want to apply. So there's this nice effect called erosion. If I give you an example here. So erosion in this mode, it's got a couple different modes. Erosion running in sine mode is kind of, I want to say it's like frequency modulation. I think it's taking a sine wave. What it's doing is it's using a sine to modulate the incoming audio. And you can drag around basically the frequency anywhere from 300 hertz to 18K. 18 kilohertz, and then there's an up and down is the amount. So and then the oscilloscope, you see those frequencies coming in, right? That's the modulation coming in. You get this aliasing and these sideband frequencies coming in. It's really interesting. So I like that effect. I want to do something with that. And then there is under the panning tool, I guess the auto pan, there's this chopper effect, which I've got set to be 16th note, sort of a crazy back and forth pan. You hear the 16th sort of beating. And what I want to do with that is I sort of want to bring it in and out. So as the pad is being held, I want this amount to rise up slowly. So. And then fade back out, right? So that's 2 effects that are things I want to add into this, okay? So what I've done, we'll close those up. Let's look at the erosion one, okay? All right. So my synth is coming in through this external instrument. It's going into this erosion effect. Within Ableton, there are 2 modulation tools that are really useful. One is the envelope effect, which is a MIDI effect. You put it in front of where you go out to your hardware synth, or if you've got a VST, they would go in front of that VST. And basically it lets you do another ADSR envelope and map it to one of the other controls in the system. So I've got 2 envelopes here. This erosion frequency envelope, it's just the envelope tool. By the way, it's really useful to stay organized. If you select your effects, you can rename them and give them a meaningful name, so you'll remember, oh, which envelope is this for? But this is mapped to the frequency amount, so it's going to make the little frequency setting move over time. That's what this envelope is going to do. And then I've got a second envelope that I'm using to modulate the amount. So it's going to bring it in. It's going to fade in over time. And you basically, you just map them. You select map, it's blinking. You go click on the thing you want to map it to. There we go. And each envelope can map up to 8 things. Its mod matrix contains, I think, 8 slots. And this is a really useful tool within Ableton. Both the frequency MIDI plugin essentially gives you an infinite number of envelopes for mapping to other parameters on your synth. So like this Nord lead, it's only got 1 modulation envelope, right? And it's not even ADSR, it's an ASR envelope. And I'm using it already to modulate the filter within these layers. So I wanted another one. I could use this and map it to a MIDI CC and go out to my synths. So you can actually use the Ableton MIDI envelope plugins to modulate your external gear. Or in this case, I've got it modulating this erosion plugin by mapping it to amount and frequency. And so what that gives us is that erosion sound, right? You can see the little ball moving on the erosion plugin as the two envelopes are being run. Right? And you can set those however you want. They're just envelopes, and you're using through modulate. So that's the sort of next layer in the system. And then that panning, that chopping pan I want to bring in, that's over here. All right. So here's our chopper effect. Now what I wanted to do is I wanted something that would manually move this amount. Well, like the MIDI plugin for the envelope, there is a plugin for LFO. You can get another low frequency oscillator in Ableton and map it in the same way to other parameters, either external gear through MIDI CCs or internal gear just through modulation routing. So by clicking on my map button, and I went and then clicked on this little amount knob in my chopper, you could see my LFO is here, right? I'll speed it up so it's a little more obvious. There's my LFO cycling through and controlling this amount knob. And I just keep it at a really low rate. Let's see, 0.7, I think. Excuse me, 0.07. There we go. Key entry, always awesome. And then you can control its depth, its offset, like how broad, how far does it move the knob, and then what is the range of the knob, right? So depth is how much. Make it obvious by turning the rate up. So I can give it a higher depth. And I can offset it. So do I want it small or large amounts? Let me bring that back down. So a big help on all of this, okay, is to read the manual. If you go to Ableton's website, go to their support section, go and help, you can find basically the encyclopedia, thesaurus, the encyclopedia, the dictionary for every effect in Ableton. It's really well written. I strongly suggest you read the manual for these things. It'll give you a lot more power in what you're doing. But now, so I've got this LFO running and bringing this chopper in and out. So if you'll see as the LFO rises, my chopper gets a higher amount value, and we hear it. And then it fades back out. And that gives us our sound. Now I've got these turned up to 11, basically. I may not normally use quite so much erosion. But that's the breakdown, okay? So this space pad is basically 4 layers, right? We've got this sort of folded sawtooth. It's got some chorus, some delay, a little reverb on it, running it in unison so it detunes a little bit. We've got another sawtooth wave. This one is got a bandpass filter on it, and it's just rising and then falling. Also a little bit of unison on it, so it's detuned slightly. On top of these is a couple arpeggiated layers, sort of doing space plucks. A lot of chorus, a lot of delay, a lot of reverb. One's going downwards at an 8th note pattern, and one is going down and then up again, and this is in quarter notes, but also with an 8th note delay. A little chorus, a little reverb. And then when we lay them all together, and then if you want to take it a little further, you can add some panning and erosion effects in Ableton. And so that's basically it. You can do this. It just takes thinking in layers, and it doesn't matter if you're using hardware or software or a bit of both. If you've got a single synth, multiple synths, you can work in layers. Take very simple layers, put them on top of each other, have them do interesting things. You want to modulate things slowly over time generally. Your envelopes go up and down, in and out, doesn't really matter. Your arps, you can have one or more arpeggiation layers or sequenced layers. Having multiple layers playing against each other is interesting to our ears, and really that's about it. I will probably do another sort of deconstruction video of another future patch, one that is just software based, not hardware based, later in the week. And that's it. I hope this has been useful or at least entertaining to you. And as always, you have been watching Synth Seeker. Have a great weekend.